Thank you all for joining. This is actually segment 5 of Roopa's 6 questions for authors. So what happened was that I wrote, I was sort of sitting there thinking through, and every time I would go into any event about the book, I'd keep getting a set of questions, and I thought, these are very interesting questions, and I should find out from my author friends what they were doing about these questions. So these are the 6 questions, and I will run you through the questions as well.
Okay.
I'll run you through the same questions. So the overall, I mean, just for some context, some of you know me as somebody who's been in business, and I've written business books before. And so the fact that I landed up writing a piece of fiction meant that I started getting a certain type of question. And I thought, let me ask people who've had other day jobs who landed up writing and sort of diverging from their day job, because you are in the world of business in Reader's Digest, right? And so you did a whole other thing with your life and then went on to write as well. So these are the kinds of questions I will be asking you. So starting with the very first one, which is, what was your origin spark? What actually first got you to think about writing a book and sitting down and doing the hard work that it takes to write a book? And just as an intro, Aseem Chhabra is sort of a movie maven who has gone on to write, is it 4 books now?
3.
3 books. 3 books that
I've
talks about
contributed to
some.
many other books.
You have, and you've written about stars and sort of delved into some deep and interesting stories that make them who they are, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about you.
So everybody dreams of writing books, of course. Everybody has books. Everybody's dreaming of getting their Nobel prizes or their Booker awards or whatever. I would dream of it, but I've been a journalist for quite a while. In fact, I came to the US to go to Columbia Journalism School, and then sort of switched my life and went into an MBA, which is when you mentioned Reader's Digest. I worked for a whole bunch of media companies, magazines mostly, but doing management work for them. But I was continuing to do at home at night, mostly film related interviews with people or columns or sometimes gossipy thing. When Madhuri Dixit got married, I was sort of, although the news had already appeared in India, but nobody knew anything, but I was the first one to do a detailed story about the whole marriage. And so from that to interviews with filmmakers and actors and scriptwriters and plays, I mean, I'm naturally drawn to the arts, and especially films and theatre. The Shashi Kapoor book came my way. I was asked by, so this was published in 2016, so I think in 2014 probably, strange story, but I was with some people, friends, with one friend had invited me for lunch with a whole group of other friends in this area called Shapur Jat in South Delhi, which is like a mini wannabe horse cars village.
Okay.
And there's a fantastic Bihari restaurant there called Pot Belly. So we were sitting and eating in Pot Belly, and I met this one particular woman who was actually at that time she was writing books, and her name is Dharni Bhaskar. She writing fiction, but nothing came out of that. And then I was back in New York, and in the middle of the night, it was 2-3 in the morning, when I keep waking up and checking, there was a message from her from Facebook that I have just become a commissioning editor at Roopa. Are you interested in talking about
Roopa Publishing?
Roopa Publishing.
Yes.
Interested, and which is a sister publication. The main actually,
LF's, parent publication.
Yeah,
Yes.
parent publication.
Yeah.
So, are you interested in writing about some stars, biographies or something? So, of course, in the middle of the night, I said yes. And then I woke up in the morning. I'm like, what have I promised? And let's see. And it took a while to figure out about Shashi Kapoor. She came up with suggestions of names of stars, and I was not interested. Because what ends up happening is especially when you're writing a biography or something, you live with the person for at least 2 years or something like that. And I had to really care and like that person. And they were writers, they were filmmakers and actors that I was like, I don't want to write about Hrithik Roshan. I mean, they asked me to write about Kangana Ranaut at the time, and she was not this
The phenomenon that she is.
poison, vicious person that she is now. But even then, I didn't care about her. Two journalist friends of mine in India had simultaneously published books on Rajesh Khanna. And they actually met at a party and they realized they're both writing books on Rajesh Khanna. But they're very different books. And so I began to think about who, there's been no book about it. And I mentioned Shashi Kapoor to my editor friend Dharni at that point. And what happens is that idea then has to be passed on to the marketing department, and they have to all talk about, can it be sold? Because there were things I suggested to them, and they're like, well, it'll never sell, it'll never sell, it'll never sell. So they said okay to Shashi Kapoor, and I was like fine. And then this contract arrives, and it said that I had to write minimum of 40,000 words, which scared the hell out of me because in my journalism writing career, when I used to write Mumbai Mirror column, it was usually like 1,000 words.
Right.
I could write about up to 1,500, maybe up to 2,000. 40,000 words is a lot of words. Right. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? And the other thing was that, while I had this real passion for Shashi Kapoor, I also had to figure out, he was alive at that time. Although I learned he was very unwell, he had dementia, and he was living with his son in Mumbai, but he had a daughter living in Delhi. She still does, Sanjana, and the son Kunal also lives in Mumbai, and then there's a middle son who lives in London. So I was introduced to Sanjana by a very dear friend of mine, who you guys know, Dave Benegal.
Oh yeah.
Dave's first job as an AD when he got into films in the early 80s. So Shyam Benegal was Dave's uncle, and Shyam Benegal said to Dave that I'm going to be directing a film called Kaliyog, which Shashi's producing. So you go all the way down to Prithvi Theatre area and Janki Kutir area and talk to Shashi and Jennifer because So they went there to sign up to work on this project, but became very good friends of Shashi's children.
I see. And
So they've introduced me to Sanjana, and then I went to Sanjana's house in Malcha Marg. She was married to Valmik Thapar, who passed away recently. He's a very, very well known, he's a tiger expert in Delhi. So I went in interviewed Sanjana, and actually it was really very informative. Of course, she told me a lot of things about it, but I really wanted to know what it meant to be Shashi Kapoor's daughter, for instance, and how their mother had sort of made sure that the family could be would have like a very normal living. They were not going to be like star kids or something. She would take her kids in those Bombay's best buses and all those kind of things.
Okay.
But it was through Sanjana that I realized that her mother's sister, her aunt Felicity, had an autobiography, plus the grandfather, maternal grandfather, had an autobiography, which I didn't know about those books.
Right.
So I learned a lot through Sanjana, and that started the process rolling. Then of course it was a question of going through how was I going to frame the book. And Shashi Kapoor had a huge career in India. I didn't want to necessarily focus on any of that because he made a lot of really bad, crappy films, and he made a lot of money.
Right.
But he also used the money, for instance, later when they established Prithvi Theatre in Bombay. It's the only institution, I think, even now in India, which is almost 365 days that they're open and they have their theatre going on. But also he used his money to produce.
Right, and he also did. On the end,
Six,
some great movies.
at least 5 very good films, and 6th one he directed himself. So 36 Chowring Lane, Junoon, Kaliyog, Vijayata. And then he did this whole merchant ivory work, which I was very interested in. So that was what I was interested in, and I, in the process, ended up talking to many people who had worked with Shashi, and everybody. Shabara was after me. When is the book coming out? When is the book coming out? They were all very keen that some sort of a tribute to Shashi should come out. So it worked out very well. I went to interview James Ivory here on the east side of 52nd Street. He lives, and he started and gave me. I had interviewed him before, but he started and gave me some very interesting anecdotes of working with Shashi in various films, but also. Then one day I went to see him and he was going to give me photographs, and he pulled out these boxes of photographs. James Ivory's apartment is like a museum, first of all. There's a corner which is a tribute to Ismail, which is like really tragic, really,
Right.
because he's got a photograph of Ismail when he was 15 years old, and there's all of that. And so he pulled out all these photographs, and he said, I'm going to give you photographs that have not been published before, because there's a lot of. So it was just wonderful, the kind of support I got. I mean, directors who films Shashi Kapoor produced, from Aparna Sen to Shyam Benegal, very forthcoming in the tribute to Shashi, and giving details,
Right.
and even the commercial films he did, for instance, a lot of them. So it was really, I really enjoyed the process.
So going from the sort of trepidation of 40,000 to
Yeah.
actually having a lot of.
Well, but then
great
of course, when I sent it to my publisher the first time, I was like so nervous, and then, so whatever deadline was given to me, I finished it like a week before. I've never meet deadlines like that. And I sent it to her, and then no response. A month goes by, no response.
Right.
So I wrote to her. I said, listen, I'm really sorry, but I'm very insecure. I mean, please tell me if this is not working out, because I put in a lot of effort. And she looked back and said something. She said, listen, I've been busy with other projects, so I had to finish that. And then the editing process was really very, very useful and helpful.
Right.
Questions and
Right.
things like that.
So let me, so there's this whole question that gets asked with the assumption everyone has that, a writer sits down at 6 a.m. You have people like Roald Dahl or Jeffrey Archer who talk about how they wake up at 6 and they sit down with their little pad and they'll write for 4 hours and then take a break. And that, I think, is a bit of a fiction for most people. I mean, I can certainly say that I do try to keep Saturday mornings for writing, but really I have to think, I percolate for a while, and then one day I'll say, okay, I'm going off for a week to a writer's retreat, and then I'll write 30,000 words, right? So I think each person has their own process depending on where you are in life. Sounds like you had a great time with the research part, but when it comes down to putting those words on paper, what did it truly look and feel like?
So I had to first of all think in terms of how I'm going to formulate the book. What are the chapters going to be like? I wanted to introduce the readers to Shashi Kapoor's works, his films, and so I had to go through periods of his works. I wanted people to be able to rediscover or discover Shashi's films for the first time. And so the chapters were formulated, which is what I did with my other 2 books also, the one with Priyanka Chopra and the one with Irrfan Khan, basically. There were basic notes on my laptop and as drafts on my Gmail. One of the things I would do is, when I would sit and transcribe, because at that time I would have to transcribe. Now I use
AI.
Otter, which transcribes you, even though you still have to work and edit it. It's an AI tool. So then I would transcribe it, and then I would be very worried that I'm going to fall asleep and something is going to happen to my Word document, and it's all going to go. So I would email myself everything that is,
Sounds
so
familiar.
it was there. Gmail also had the thing, so at least I had access to things that they were lost. So the book sort of took the shape in terms of the time frame. It was the biography, so I was going to be talking about his life also as much as possible, but I wanted to try sort of mix the works that he did, at whichever point it was, whatever film it was, where was his life also. So I actually really enjoyed. I enjoyed writing all my 3 books, but especially the Shashi Kapoor one and this one, Irrfan one, I really enjoyed.
Right. So you're writing as you go along, as you're doing your research, and then it sort of comes together in the end.
So when you transcribe all your interviews, it comes back to you in your head. And
Right.
I mean, a lot of people are much more, and you probably are also, especially writing a novel, when you have to have everything. Sort of one by one, step by step, in terms of how you're going to handle it. A lot of the book would be written in my head,
Right.
in terms of chapters and frames. I mean, I would do little notes for myself.
Right.
And then it was like, okay, I'm going to cover this period, but then how do you transition from one chapter to another?
Right.
How do you transition from one period to another, kind of a thing?
Right.
But there would be gaps, for instance. There were times that I was not necessarily talking. So.
Yeah. So tell me about the day job, tension, because in my case, I had work to do, and then I would come in on hence my Saturdays and my nights. You do multiple things, right? You're running movie festivals, you're doing other things, you're journalism. How did you manage to actually find the time and focus?
Well, so the real day jobs I had stopped after 2009.
Okay.
I became completely like a freelancer. Shashi Kapoor book I worked mostly in 2014 and 2015, and then it came out in the summer of 2016. I think there came a point where I couldn't focus on a lot of the journalism thing. The film festival has to be done because it's
a time.
And it's also, the journalism work I do is, since I've been a freelancer, of course I'm commissioned to do pieces also, but I write, I work on films, I interview people only if I want to.
Right.
Otherwise I tell editors that I don't have time. Which means maybe less money coming, as it is I've never made good money as a journalist. So, so it's a question of what becomes the priority. And with the Shashi Kapoor book, especially because the deadline was this really serious deadline kind of a thing.
Right.
I met the deadline initially.
What about, have you ever had to abandon an idea or a plan? Like, I've always had this idea about sort of the immigrant life and being very much like exile, but I just feel like it's a very heavy topic and I'm not ready to write it. What's your abandoned idea or shelved idea for now?
There are lots of ideas sitting in my head.
Mm-hmm. But you haven't abandoned them?
No, I'm not abandoning them. I dream of them, and I'm getting older and older, and I don't know if there's enough time left in my life to do it.
Okay. Tell us about one.
The one that I really seriously want to do is sort of a part biography of my father, part autobiography of my own life.
Okay.
My father was born in what is now Pakistan, and at the age of 18, 19, they came as refugees into India after my grandfather was killed during the riots by his Muslim neighbors. But my father was sort of a pioneer in a lot of ways. I mean, including the fact that he was, joined journalism. He joined one of the first African studies departments in Delhi. So this was also time India had just become independent, and Jawaharlal Nehru was helping supporting African freedom movements elsewhere. And my dad was quite progressive in his ideas in that sense. He was Nehruvian, Gandhian, and it's very interesting due to the fact that his father was killed by Muslims. Never ever sort of talked about anything negative about Muslims necessarily, and always the Gandhian view about sort of a secular India, the Nehruvian view. So I mean, of course, then he became a publisher, and so there is that life, and then there is my life also. And like almost 25, 30 years later, I left India and migrated to America. Well, I didn't come as an immigrant, but became an immigrant at some stage. So it's been playing in my head in different forms, and sometimes it gets even more interesting. I mean, I found some papers of my father, which my mother had saved so much stuff, and I moved homes from various homes in Delhi, and then now moved to Hyderabad. But I found some fascinating papers and documents. I have to do it.
Yeah.
Now the other part of the thing is that the 3 books that I was commissioned to do when I signed contracts. So, and there was a pressure to meet that you get little royalty advances. You have to sort of justify that.
Right.
Nobody putting the gun to my head.
On this one,
Except for my own guilt is killing me.
Right. Well, talk about so I call my sort of sense of purpose and my metric for success, I call it my shelf test. It's like I walk around and see whether the book is on the shelf, and I call that I just want to see that. That's my metric for success. How do you, it's like you've gotten those 3 contracts, you've gotten the books in there. What is success? What is your metric?
Well, it was the metric of success. My friend Malika Dutt actually saw my book. I was in the US, so I had not seen the book come out in India. And Malika saw it at some airport.
Right.
And I was passing, I had I arrived in Delhi, and I was at the Delhi airport, and I think on WH Smith is the bookstore, the chain is called.
Right.
I went there and my book, the Shashi Kapoor book was there. Yeah.
So
and then after that, just seeing your book being sold in various bookstores One of my favorite bookstores is it's called the Bookshop. It used to be in Khan Market and moved to Lodi Road. And I dropped by there to see where my book would be sold, but it was on in the window, right, the front glass window.
Yes.
It was like the most exciting thing. I took pictures, and then friends were sending me pictures from Chandigarh and in the south somewhere. And
Right.
there is a period, and you probably are going through that. There's a real high when your book comes out. Reviews come out. You get invited to lit fests. Of course, this one came out during the pandemic, so there was hardly any lit fest. It was the online stuff, but yeah, there's a lot. There is a short amount of few months and few years of fame that you get.
Right. Oh, fame in quotes.
Well, I mean, it is. I mean, suddenly people start to respect you, and even though it's never a lot of money.
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah, I do have business friends who'll ask me about the money, and I just laugh. Tell me about this idea. There's sort of what I call the necessary lie. It's like this lie I tell myself that the books I write is for everyone, and I know it's not the case. I know that there's a certain demographic that probably wants my book. Is there a lie that keeps you going? And I know this is a provocative question, but is there something you tell yourself to just keep at it? Even though in your heart you might not know, it might not be true.
I've had people walk up to me, and then this lady who just left actually, that she said she had read my book, Shashi Kapoor, for instance. But now this has been a while. I've had people walk up to me and saying that they read my book and whatever. This one especially, because Irfan died 4 months after that, and it's amazing how many people approach me. Just I've read your book, Irfan book and all, and I want to meet you and you want to sign it or something like that. But then I walk around in streets of India, sometime in New York, and I hear people calling me, and they're not there. No one's calling me. So this fame doesn't last too long. My royalty payment, this book was 6 years ago. Royalty payments have almost stopped coming now.
Right. So that's but the lie is the
well, but I
person
see the
calling
books.
your
I'm so happy to have. Of course, you guys are. I gifted you these copies, but even in my own library, when I see the books, and I'm like, okay, so I did something.
Right. Well, no, you did a tremendous thing actually.
Thank you.
Yes, and I think did Shashi actually see the book?
He was already in a very, very bad shape. Sanjana told me that he's hard of hearing and he's dementia and this and that. My mother kept saying you should try and go and give him a copy or something like that. And so Shashi's son Kunal was very hard to get to. Also, another Dev Bengal connection. They knew him very, very well. But he would respond and he would not respond. And then I was at the Goa, the Film Bazaar in the International Film Festival was on, and I saw him at a party one evening. Goa is such a hot, humid. It's just hot in Goa, and heat is a big problem with me. And he was at this party wrapped in a pashmina shawl. I was like, this guy. I walked up to him, hi, I'm Aseem Chhabra, but we had talked about, this book I'm doing, but I never got to talk to you. He said, well, I didn't say that I'm not going to give you an interview. Then give me an interview. So we were actually staying in the same hotel, Taj. Next morning I met him for breakfast. And so what had happened was, I had actually finished the book at that point. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or what.
Yeah, yes.
So I practically finished the book. And so to get his voice, I had quoted from other articles. And
Right.
which is, as journalists, you learn to, a lot of this, especially this kind of writing work, was the journalism skills I had. It's basically interviewing people and chasing people. So, but I then started to ask Kunal questions, which would then, in his own words, he would answer the same what I had already written.
What you'd already written.
In the process, he told me other things also, which was very, very good.
Right. Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I look forward to seeing what your next project is.
Thank you.
Thank you for answering the 6 questions.
Thank you.
For the authors.
I'm sorry, that took
Are there
too long.
questions from? Oh no. Are there questions from? Thank you. Are there questions from the audience? Anything for Aseem?
Our friend here has questions.
Yes.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Shout.
Both Roopa and you talked a lot about having books in your head and wanting to write it. Do you think that you could have started earlier? Was there something that was stopping you but you might have started even 10 years before you actually did.
I should have started writing much earlier. When the Shashi Kapoor book came out in 2016, and which was 10 years ago, and I'm not going to tell you how old I was, but I was pretty old by then. I should have been writing in my 30s. But you know, the other part of my life has been that I gave up writing in journalism because I went and did an MBA. And for about 15 plus years, I used to tell editors to cut back on freelancers to save the bottom line.
It's come to roost.
Yeah. But then I started doing writing. Actually, I really lucked out when Rediff bought India Abroad, and they started bringing out an American edition and all of those kind of things, and I knew them. And so then I started writing again, but then it was like, you know, you have a day job, you come back home, you have a child, you have a family and everything else, and then you also want to stay up because this is the deadline, somebody wants the article by tomorrow, next morning.
Right.
But yeah, I could have written my books earlier probably, I don't know.
I think
Whatever.
it's always about time, right? I think, you know, COVID was a horrible time, and yet it was a gift to somebody like me because, you know, the kids were old enough, they were taking care of themselves, work was getting done, and there was no commute. So I just had those extra 2 hours a day that then morphed into even more a day, and that's when the first draft happened. I don't know that I would have been on this path if it hadn't been for that year and a half of time. So yeah, that's it.
So, yeah, I'm Krishna Raja, I'm a chemist, of course, and so, not a writer. But again, writing, when you wrote the first copy of your book and stuff, how did you get feedback from somebody else to validate yourself as you're going through the process? Question number one. And the second question is, now that you've got Big Brother, what I meant is Gemini out there, would you think you can crank out a book faster with the
What's a Big Brother? AI?
AI? Do you think?
I don't go in that direction, no. I have to write myself. I heard Jan Martel being interviewed. There was an Insta reel where somebody asked Jan Martel, "Oh, can you have AI write your novel?" He says it's like asking somebody else to go have sex for you.
I think he's answered well.
That's a great answer.
What was your first question?
No, the first question is, when you're going through the writing process, do you have somebody you reach out to just?
Well, but I had very good editors I was working with.
That's great. So
In all the 3 cases,
Yes.
I had very good editors. By the time I had written these books, the first one was, of course, it was an experience really. I mean, the questions she asked me, the way she pushed me, you got to make this clearer, you got to write more about this, go dig into your notes and find more stuff. And that became very good. I like good editors, they drive you crazy and you're like, oh, I hope they don't bother you anymore. But by the way, I write at least a couple of times a year for the Hindu.
Yes.
And excellent editors. But they really mess up with your life. Really, it becomes so stressful. I wrote a piece a few months ago about the Paramount-Warner merger. More questions and try and talk to another person. We need another voice kind of thing. I wrote for the Hindu on Payal Kapadia's film All We Imagine Is Light, at the point when it was almost very close to getting an Oscar nomination. It had already gotten nominations on Golden Globes.
Yeah.
I was on vacation in Cambodia. I was with a friend and we were literally where the killing fields were. And my Hindu editor was talking to me saying, sorry, I'm ruining it. I'm seeing all these skulls around me. And I was doing the editing work on the phone, talking to her. But good editors are really a blessing.
Yeah, I understand. Yes.
You should also if you're in the business of planning to have a writing career, I do have at least 3 people that I consider my beta readers.
Yeah.
One is my husband, the other
okay.
is my father because he's been the source of a lot of my fiction writing. But I have a third person who's was my first supervisor boss in my business life, but he loves my writing, and so he reads, and he'll read my first draft, Alan. And so I just have these 3 folks who will read my first draft, and so that I know is the story flowing, right? I mean, with fiction, especially murder mystery, you actually have a calendar you need to keep in your head, and the logic has to flow. So you need somebody to look at it pretty critically. So
And they are the best. That's
Yeah.
good if you think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you tell us about having a life where you got to hang out with people like George Clooney over there and meet all these people and famous stars and interview them?
I'll tell you the George Clooney story.
Okay.
So, I would have never thought about it, but I have a friend, Pooja Kohli, who lives, she had my job at the New York Indian Film Festival. And she now is a film producer, and she's produced these TV shows, Delhi Crime, etc.
Oh, wow.
She used to always say to me that I look like the Indian George Clooney. So it got really there. Like, I look like the Indian George Clooney. I was at the Telluride Film Festival. So, seriously, I mean, people just need to boost my ego and really go. I was at the Telluride Film Festival, and they had shown, Fox Searchlight had brought the film Descendants, and it was a premiere for that.
Yeah.
And that one night, so Fox would have a party for all the films they had at the festival, including the Descendant thing. And it's at this old bar, which is part of a very old hotel. It's a long bar, and the back was the food, and then the bar area was right there. And you enter, of course, and there was George Clooney just standing there, talking to people like any normal. I think he had a blue sweater that sweater. Yeah, I remember. So, and he was just talking to normal people, just standing at the bar, and people kept walking up to him and saying, "George, can I have a photograph?" And he was obliging everyone. But I'm so nervous, and my friend Geeta Mishra also asked me. She said, "George, can you take a picture?" So I even took a picture of Geeta. Meanwhile, I drank about 4 glasses of Chardonnay to be able to gain courage to ask George for a photograph. And then I said to George, finally, I had to, because I had to prove to Pooja Kohli that, okay, there's the American George Clooney, there's the Indian George Clooney. How often they'll ever meet? They've never met again. And I walked up to him, and he's right by the bar, and you said, "George, can I have a photograph?" "Oh yeah, sure." I've seen, I won't name them, good close friends of mine, filmmakers from India also, including some come to festival. People will walk up to them and say that, "Can I have a photograph?" "Not now, I'm talking." George Clooney was obliging everybody, so I got a picture with George Clooney, but then I asked somebody else to take a picture. But my friend Geeta Mishra, who you probably know through Sakhi, I had already taken a picture of hers, and she didn't like the picture I had taken, and she said, "Aseem, I want to get into the picture also." So this photograph has been edited, and it's edited more and more. There's the little tiny Geeta standing right next to me, and I've tried to get rid of her from that photograph.
Did you tell him that people tell me I'm an
No.
Indian George
Nothing.
Clooney?
Picture taken, he moved again because he was obliging people for. So.
One more question for you. Okay, what's your best tip for each of you for writers? What's a tip each? Or what's something you wish someone had told you before you started writing books?
I don't know. It's a lot more work than just producing an article, which you do in a couple of days or a day or something like that. Really, but it's important because especially when you're writing biographies, you really live with that person for quite a while. And when I wrote the book on Priyanka Chopra, which is not here, and I haven't talked about it initially, and that was my publisher who asked me to write on Priyanka Chopra, and I didn't want to write about Priyanka Chopra, but then I said, okay, there was a part of Priyanka's career which I was finding very interesting, which was how a star in India comes to another country and nobody knows her, and she was trying to re-establish herself as a star in a country where nobody knew. But even then, you have to read and live with the person. And Priyanka they had refused to give me interviews because she had gone and signed a contract to write her own book. So I'll tell you a funny story related to that in a second. But as I wrote about Priyanka, I began to admire her. Really, I mean, I start off with almost at the very beginning about how she was the Miss India and Miss World, and I spoke to a few people who were involved in the Femina Miss India, Miss World, and Samira Merchant, who would teach these young people to have diction, the exercises. Priyanka had just come because as a teenager, she had lived in America for some time, and so she developed this completely American accent. And Samira said to her that, listen, you're going to be representing your country, India. Speak like an Indian, don't speak in English or something like that. The funny story I was going to tell you was that I had already been in touch with, Anjula Acharya. So Anjula is the one who actually built Priyanka's career here and managed everything here. So Anjula and I had a long chat on the phone. She said, what are you going to be writing, this, that and all. And then Anjula put me in touch with two of Priyanka's lawyers. One who was literally for books and one is a celebrity lawyer and very aggressive. These two lawyers, I talked to them. So I was all prepared and then I was not hearing anything from them. And then I wrote and then they both all said that Priyanka had signed a contract with some other publisher and one of the contract was she would not talk to another author. I mean, it's one thing that she would give journalistic interviews, and I'd already interviewed her in the past, so I had all of that. That was my material. I met Priyanka's mother because Priyanka and her mother at that time had started producing some films, some independent films, and we actually showed 2 films that year. And Arun Shivdasani, who was here just a little while ago, she and Priyanka's mother and I were there waiting for the films to start. And Priyanka's mom was going to introduce the film, we were going to do the Q&A. And I said to her, I said, I'm writing this book on Priyanka. And earlier the plan was that maybe today I would have met you earlier and I would have had a long interview with you. But now I'm not allowed to interview you. So she said, are you writing in first person or third person or something like that? Obviously I'm writing on my own and writing about your daughter and all. She said, in Hindi she said, but she said, how does it matter? There have been thousands of books written on Mahatma Gandhi. And I said to myself, this woman is comparing her daughter to Mahatma Gandhi. I was like, what's happening? But I narrated the story to my editor and the owner of Roopa. And he said to me, what she's saying is absolutely true. You can write about her.
Right.
You have to be very careful when you write because you don't want there to be a libel lawsuit or something. So you don't write things from a malicious point of view. But these are public figures, you can write.
Right.
So nobody stopped me to writing.
Nice.
Okay. Roopa, your tip.
My tip. Well, I think certainly with fiction, what I feel is that you first write that first level of story, and then you have to keep going back and rewriting and getting the next level of depth until the point that you're really uncomfortable. Certainly, with the type of story you're telling, right? Like, for example, you can say, there was a murder, and then you have to say, well, sure, there was a murder, but there was a dripping knife, and then you have to get to the point where my book starts with this person walking, carrying a head, and you've got to get to the point where it's uncomfortable for it to actually affect the reader. And I think I found that with my book tends to have very concise, specific chapters, and in every one of them I try to get it to the point where it's hurting. And that's the only way it actually will feel like a real piece of work has happened here. So lot of work goes into that. So yeah.
Can you hold your books, both of you? Yeah. Oh, yeah, we'll take a photo. Okay, everyone. All right. Nice. We also have George in the picture. So that's good.
This is why I write books. This is the only those fleeting moments of fame.
Come in, guys. Come. Guys, this is our neighbor Majabeen and her beautiful daughter.